Welcome back. We're on number 4. Why would you repurchase your own stock? And how do we treat it when we do so? Okay, so let's get into the second and so on reasons before we get back to this first one. You may want to decrease the shares of stock that are out there in the world, because what's going to happen is if you go out there and you buy a whole bunch of your shares of stock, probably the stock price is going to go up, the market price, or at least that's really what you're hoping for. Because the less that are out there, the more in demand, right? If you've got just too many out there, typical supply-demand thing, you've got way too many out there, the price is going to be low. So one of the main reasons is to drive up the price or support the price. They don't say drive it up. You may acquire that stock and you may use it to turn around and give your employees some stock, things like that, right? Use it for your own purposes. This first one was actually interesting. I was like, wait, what? Viewed as a way to distribute company profits without paying dividends. And they put distribute in quotes. So, of course, that made me go, I don't really understand what they mean. Well, here's what they mean. What's going to happen is if you go out and repurchase your own stock in the market, is you don't have to pay dividends on that stock because you repurchase it as treasury stock, right? Basically. And you're not going to pay dividends on treasury stock because it's in your own hands. So in that case, when you do pay out dividends, it will be more to the employees that have not employees, to the people who do have outstanding shares of stock out there, your shareholders, because they're getting a greater share. Also, it fictitiously affects your earnings per share, but in a positive way. Because if you think about the earnings per share calculation, it's net income minus preferred dividends over the number of common shares outstanding. So if you reduce the number of common shares outstanding, even if you have the same net income number, it's going to look like it's a higher earnings per share. It's a little math playing around. Just putting it out there. All right. And this is what I was saying, right? Shares might be required. Why would you reacquire them? You may want to give out a stock dividend to your shareholders. You may be concerned about, you may be looking towards a merger, right? To distribute a merger. You may want to stop people who are looking to hostile takeover. But how do we account for the buyback? Well, one of two ways. We can either record treasury stock or we can retire them. Interesting. All right, here's an example we're going to go through probably for a little while here. We've got American Semiconductor, we've got common stock, 100 million shares at $1 par, paid in capital excess of par. We have an account called paid in capital share repurchase, which we haven't talked about what that is yet because you're going to see it in this transaction. But let's just know that there's $2 here. And retained earnings, $2,000. The company is going to reacquire 1 million of its common shares. Now, what if we repurchase them? Here's our two examples. What if we repurchase them for $7 per share? Well, if we repurchase them for $7 a share, let's just take a look here real quick. If this is our common stock, right, being recorded at par, and that's in excess of par, 9, really, they were sold for $10 a share when we originally put them out there into the world. Now we're going to repurchase them for $7 a share. Let me move myself. There we go, go way up there. We're going to repurchase them for $7 a share. So I'm kind of ahead, right? Because I sold them for 10, but I'm rebuying them for 7. So if that's the case, I have two options. What happens if I retire them? What happens if I decide to just record them in treasury stock? Well, if I'm recording the treasury stock, we'll start with the easy one. We're just going to record it for what we originally paid for, for what we're paying for it. We record it for 7 because that's what we're paying. We're repurchasing a 7, and we've got a credit to cash for 7. Fine. Okay. And here we go. If you're retiring them, what does retiring even mean? Hang on, it's getting out of my way. What does retiring even mean? Retiring means we've repurchased them, and we're going to put them back in our authorized shares, but not outstanding. Okay, remember we've got different types of stock. The ones that are outstanding are the ones that are out there in the world. The ones that are issued are the ones that have been out there, but not necessarily as outstanding. So issued is everything that's out there. Outstanding are the ones that are still out there, but if you repurchase some treasury stock, then those have been issued but are no longer outstanding. I know, it's a lot. But we're really not talking about that piece of it. But what I want you to realize is I have authorized shares of stock from my charter, but I may have only issued a fraction of those shares out there in the world. I may still have a whole bunch. I like to think of it like a giant vault, a whole vault of stock that I have yet to put out there in the world. Right? So I can raise capital for many more years to come. So what I'm doing by retiring them is I'm putting them back in the vault. So we pretty much reverse the original sales transaction. with a few nuances to it. So we record the cash. Like I said, I always start with cash, right? Cash is easy. So you've got to credit to cash for the 7 that I put out there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse what I did before. My original entry would have been debit to cash, credit to common stock, credit to paid in capital, excess of par. That would have been the original entry when they went out there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the common stock and paid in capital and excess of par piece. So I'm going to debit common stock, and I'm going to debit my paid in capital and excess of par for the $9 a share. But now that doesn't balance, right? Because now I've got 10 on one side and 7 on the other. Pretend that 3 is in there. You're not supposed to know about that part, right? I've got 10 on that side and 7 on this side. Remember I said we're kind of making out on this transaction? We're really $3 ahead, right? So if we're really $3 ahead because we originally put them out there for 10 and we're repurchasing them for 7, so we're really $3 ahead. If that's the case, we have a new account. It's called paid in capital share repurchase, $3. That's for the piece I made out ahead. And it carries a credit balance and increases stockholders' equity. So originally in this example, too far, I have 2, so now I'd be at 5. Okay? So that's how that gets treated. There we go. Okay. Sorry, it's all over the place. Okay, I wasn't expecting all these steps. Okay, all the things I talked about. Okay, now what if I didn't make out on the transaction? What if I'm rebuying them for $13 a share instead of 7? So really I sold them for 10, I'm rebuying them for 13. Kind of in the hole for 3, right? Okay, so pretend case 1 didn't happen now. Case 2. Well, we were still, oh, look at it, it's all over the place. We'd record the cash, we'd have a credit to cash for the $13 a share. That piece doesn't change, right? Because cash has to go out to buy these shares of stock. We would reduce the transaction as we did before, right? We'd reverse that original piece. Debit common stock, debit paid in capital excess of par for the original, right? The reversal of the original, if you will. If this was a treasury stock, if that's how we were choosing to record it, just as treasury stock, then it would carry a debit balance. Treasury stock reduces stockholders' equity, so it carries a debit balance. But, there we go. Over here, how do I make this balance? So I've got $10 here, right? Wait, before I get there. There we go. I've got $10 here, I've got 13 here, which makes sense. I knew that I was in the hole by $3 a share, just based on the fact that I sold them for 10 and we're buying them for 13. So if that's the case, too far, I'm going to debit paid in capital share repurchase, because if you remember a couple of slides ago, hang on, I'll go back. There we go. The original data showed that I had a credit balance in here. I know it's a credit balance because stockholders' equity carries credit balance. I had a credit balance in here of paid in capital share repurchase from some previous transaction. So I had 2 in there first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away that positive transaction that I had, if you will. Right? At some point, I must have repurchased stock for less than I'd originally paid for it, originally gotten for it. So I had a $2 credit sitting there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wipe out that credit. We're going to take it away. So we've got a debit to zero that out. But then I'm still in the hole, right? I'm only at 12 here and I'm at 13 here. So where do I get that extra $1 from? It's going to go against my retained earnings because I'm basically spending my money here, my retained earnings, to repurchase that stock. So now I reverse the original transaction. I wipe out any share repurchase. If that account didn't exist, if there hadn't been a $2 balance in there, then my entire debit would have been a retained earnings for 3. All right? So hopefully it helps with that. Now, accounting for treasury stock, all of this, okay, like I said, you have the choice of retiring, putting it back in the vault, or keeping it on your books as treasury stock. Companies can go either way. The reason you're going to wind up with treasury stock sometimes is if you're buying it but planning to put it back out there. Okay, the reason you're putting it in your vault is if you're like putting it away. You're not planning, you don't have any current plans on selling it in the future. If you record it as treasury stock, you're probably planning on doing something with it in the not too far away future. So if that's the case, it carries a debit balance because it offsets the stock that you've already issued. As I was trying to say before, shares are considered to be issued, but they're not outstanding, meaning, they're just sitting on your books, basically. You don't have to pay any dividends on them because they're in your hands, and they're an offset to the outstanding shares of stock. Okay. Now, this slide kind of encaptures what we talked about before, that if you are, meaning you bought that share of stock in that first case with for $7 when you originally put it out for 10 would be an increase in assets, and that would be recorded as a paid in capital share repurchase, right? But if you had a decrease, right? Meaning that the $13 versus $10, you'd wind up with a reduction in retained earnings. But first thing you do is actually, if you had that reduction, you would decrease your paid-in capital share repurchase, and then if you needed more money, you'd reduce your retained earnings. Okay, how do we record this? Woo, a lot. All right, this is what it would look like if we were on case 2, where we lost money, basically, on a repurchase. So if let's just look at the treasury stock one, because it's easier. If we had treasury stock, this was the before, and then we reacquire the 1 million shares of common stock at $13 per share. If it was the treasury stock one, if we went that route, then it would just be common stock paid. Nothing would be touched. Common stock, paid in capital, the two for the share repurchase, 2,000, and then you have a -13 for the recording of that treasury stock. However, if you went the other way and you retired it, remember it took that $2 away. Well, we took away the stock, right, for the ones that we returned. We took away the paid-in capital in excess of par. Oops, too far. We got rid of that 2 entirely, and we took away 1 from retained earnings, and we wouldn't have any treasury stock. Okay, so that's ultimately what it would look like if we went with that retired route. And you can go back a little bit here to see where the journal entry was for that. So really, I'm not crazy about the order here, but that's where what this journal entry does. Okay. All right. What if I'm at 11 minutes, but I really want to finish treasury stock. All right. What if we resell the shares? If we resell the shares after they're retired, you just record a sale of shares like they're brand spanking new. Okay. Because they've put them in the vault. We're going to take them back out of the vault. And we're going to reissue shares like normal. If we're reissuing treasury shares, it's a little bit different. Okay. So here we go. If we retired them, right, now we're reselling the shares. We sell another 1 million shares. It's as if we're pulling them out of the vault, we're issuing them fresh, right? With $14 a share, cash, common stock is recorded at par, paid in capital excess par, $13. As if nothing had happened to them, right? Because you put them in the vault, now we're taking them back out of the vault, and they're as if they have no history attached to them whatsoever. However, if we were to repurchase treasury stock, the treasury stock was on our books at 13, and if we reissued them for 14, then we'd have a debit to cash for the 14, treasury stock coming off the books at 13, and we'd have paid in capital share repurchase. We're hitting that account again for the one that we kind of like made out on, right? Because the idea being we sold it for 14 when we put it back on our books at 13. All right. What happens though if it's the other way? What happens if it was $10 a share? I'm selling it for less money, because in this one I'm selling it for more money. I'm selling it for $14 a share, and I had reacquired it at 13. Okay, so now what if I'd reacquired it at 13, but I'm selling it for only 10? So I'm really losing here. If that's the case, again, the retirement one, it's as if they're fresh from the vault. So you just record the cash, common stock, paid in capital excess par. Nothing weird, right? Blank slate. Treasury stock's a little bit fuzzier though. We record the cash. Always nice to start there. We got a debit to cash for 10. That's how much we got it for. Treasury stock's 13. How do we account for this $3 discrepancy though? Well, remember there was that $2 million paid in capital share repurchase. We're going to wipe that out, and we'll debit retained earnings to make it balance. So we lose out there too. That was the 3 we lose on, if you will. If we're selling at 10, we had reacquired it for 13. Okay. Real quick, and then we will go on to, here, I'll show you this. There we go. I will stop this because we're really far, 13 minutes. 2021, Broyles Inc. reacquired 3,000 shares for common stock as treasury share, $55. 2022, they resold it for 1,000 shares for $75 a share. The reason I wanted to point this one out to you, you can look at it, pause it, review it. What I want to point out to you is that they required 3,000 shares, but they only sold 1,000 of it. So if that's the case, we take it by a third here, and we record the treasury stock for that third, and paid in capital excess of par for everything beyond that amount. All right, next video.